One big joke. It's a fucked up world. Here we are in. I ain't going nowhere.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Reason Reborn. I'm here with my co-host, CardiacSoul. I don't even care about the name thing right now. I just noticed it, and I'm just like, whatever. Just leave it. Because we're going to try to do this as quickly as possible so I don't lose my shit. Because I have had a fucking, time with this topic today. We only have one topic. First, how are you?
I know I normally answer that question. Why don't we get into it first, and then I can explain afterwards?
Yeah.
I think it's related to that topic.
Well, yeah, because part of why I asked is because it's kind of weird because most people may not know this, but this is actually National Mental Health Month. This is a hell of a way to end Mental Health Month. You know what I mean? And I know we all forget to ask, how people are and things like that. Just to take a step back from our problems, the world's problems, and just check on people, especially those people who seem like they don't have issues. We do that a whole lot. I know some people say that to me because I laugh, I joke with them. I don't share everything with them. And I be going through a lot of shit and they just don't know that. And and I think that's true for all of us. As strong as we may all seem to people, we're not that strong. We are human and we do have emotions, and you should check on people, no matter how strong you think they are. You should check on them. Just check, just to make sure everything's okay. Which reminds me, I need to text Katina after we're done with this, because shout out to my co-host from his point of review, which we're trying to get that back. Anyway, all right, so let's just go ahead. In Uvalde, Texas, there was a mass shooting. This mass shooting just followed roughly a little over a week after the Buffalo, New York shooting in the grocery store, which was also sandwiched, which also sandwiches another shooting out in somewhere in the San Fernando Valley, I believe, in California, where a bunch of Asian people were targeted. This one probably hurts. It's weird to say it this way, but this one probably hurts the most because there were kids involved. 19 children, 2 adults were killed in this incident. The shooter also shot his grandmother before arriving at the school to commit this mass shooting. So there hasn't really been details put out about his motivations, as far as I know. I don't know if you might have read anything as far as his motivation.
No, especially now, I think a lot of the coverage is leaning more toward the police conduct than finding out a motive per se. So we don't know that much about him, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's wrapped in this whole craziness and emotion. There is a shit show with the police response, and of course, as always, there's a shit show with the government response to this. As the political debate rages on, the same cycle, sadly, that goes through this whole thing is that you have the left wanting bans in the extreme to wanting regulations, the right, standing behind the NRA and the right to guns, and to the extreme, throwing out the same wacky platitudes, such as the good guy with the gun and all that other stuff like that. But yeah, the police response is the major thing. And I'll get that a second, because just the whole situation, take away the police response, it's ridiculous. why do we continue to have these situations and then people want to defend not doing anything? It fucking like, we just did a show talking about the Buffalo shooting like last week. That was the main focus. We had other subjects, but that was the main focus of that show. And now we're back here and we're thinking about this tragedy. And it's like, yo, don't y'all get tired of this? I'm tired of it.
Which I guess that is the answer to the question of how I was feeling in general. Because I was thinking about this story a lot today. Just tired. Like, was it last year or the year before? We had that maniac who went in, I guess, targeted a bunch of Asian women or something.
Yeah, I believe that was last year. Yeah.
The fact that I couldn't remember just what a blur the last few years have been. It was that story, like you said last week, I believe. We were talking about a racial attack on another race. The one I just mentioned before was Asian people. This time it was Black people. Here we have another killing with children, which is not even rare. A lot of shootings happen in schools. I guess I thought about that in the context of those other recent shootings we've talked about. And I just thought, a lot of times when an issue only affects like, group A, group B may not care about it as much. They're not really as cognizant of that. But I just thought, this affects everyone, every race all the time. Like, yet it doesn't really seem to be that unified, I just thought, okay, we don't really care enough to do anything when a bunch of Asian people get targeted and killed. We don't really care to do anything when a bunch of Black people get targeted and killed. We don't really give a shit to do anything. And obviously this isn't the first time, but we don't really care to do anything when a bunch of 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds get killed. Like, I just looked at that and I see all these headlines from the politicians saying, this has got to change. We've got to do something. And I'm just like, isn't that the same headline that comes up every time?
Right.
Like, you can almost predict them word for word because you hear them every 4 to 6 months ish.
Not even that. It's actually more frequent than we think. It's just that we kind of gloss over the smaller instances, which I wanted to bring up the stat, which is mind-boggling. As of now, we've had 212 mass shootings in the year 2022. Think about that. Today of this recording is May 28th. So what's that? Say 30 days each month. Yeah, we haven't even hit 150 days, and we're roughly around 150 days in the year. People and we've had more shootings than there are days in this year.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd seen that statistic that there have been more. Actually, they weren't just shootings, if I remember right. I think they were more "quote unquote" mass shootings.
Yeah, they're mass. That's what I was saying. Mass shootings, by definition. Yeah. No, I was saying by definition, a mass shooting is any place. It's sad that we have this as a definition. Who would have thought that we would have to use this as like common, common use, a common use term? But mass shooting is any situation when there are 4 or more victims, excluding the shooter, that are killed by gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
So
I saw that qualification. I guess I didn't know if that was the general definition, but that was whoever shared that statistic, because I believe it's some independent organization that keeps track of it. That was at least their definition. I just remember thinking, dear God, like the fact that they had to say that little caveat to point out that, like, yeah, there's probably a bunch more, but these are the ones that meet the criteria for what we're talking about, and already it's that many.
yeah, like it just sucks that only 3 people die in a shooting. because they don't get the
I
acknowledgement.
mean, yeah, really think about that. If it's
Jesus
only
Christ.
3 people, it doesn't make the
Yeah,
mark. And that's not a shot
well,
against them. Obviously, it's just sad.
no, it's just that it's sad that we have to like qualify. There's qualifications like that. Like shooting of any kind is fucked up. But let's see.
I don't know if this is accurate, but like an hour or so ago, I swear I saw some headline. I should have saved it. I think it claimed that gun deaths are now the leading cause of death for children in the
Yes,
U.S.
that was
I don't know
an
if that's
article
accurate,
that
but like,
no, because it is because that was an article that had actually the NPR published earlier this week. So yeah, it has been statistically proven that yes, gun violence is the number one cause of death for kids in this country, which is insane. Like that shows you that we have a pretty, maybe it's not substantial, it's not a substantial number, but it's a glaring number that is what will take kids out because you have so much other things like childhood diseases that used to be up there, but we took care of the problem. And this leads to the whole like, why do we keep doing this? Because we took over problems like polio and measles, chickenpox, things that used to slaughter children, in large rates. We worked hard to find, ways to cure that. Maybe now that this is the leading like cause of death for children, are you going to finally take the steps and the actions to do something? I don't know. I mean, it's pretty much probably like going to be within a year or two the largest cause of death for all demographics. To be quite honest, like it will release demographics up to the age of 55. I feel like because these things keep happening in like such rapid succession, like so much that we weren't aware of that 212 number. Probably, if you think about it, like I wasn't aware until they said it. I can only think about the handful that were, put on national news.
I wasn't aware of the overall tally, but I also think it is useful. I can't remember who I first saw share that little statistic there, but yeah, it is useful to cast those kind of numbers in those kind of ways to give some perspective to them. You know what I mean? But I saw the way they phrased it, like, yeah, more deaths than more mass shootings than days in the year. We're not even halfway done with it. It's like depressing.
Yeah, and
I know I keep going silent. I'm just kind of like lost for words every time I think about it.
I mean, what more can you say? We're tired. You said you're tired. We're all tired.
Yeah.
And the fact that we have to have these discussions over and over again and to listen to these like objections to just simple things like, everybody keeps making the same arguments over and over for gun regulations. Like, look at what you have to go through to get a license. I know in the state of Maryland, you cannot get a driver's license unless you go to a driving school. You have to complete driving school. You also have to meet certain requirements behind the wheel with supervision. Then you have to take your learner's test to get your learners. And then you have to wait until you can qualify to take your driver's test. You have to schedule an appointment, and then you have to pass that driver's test. This kid, for his 18th birthday, walked into a store, grabbed 2 AR-15s, walked out, walked back in later, and grabbed over 300 rounds of ammunition. No problem. You can't smoke a cigarette unless you're 21. You will get carded up to the age of 30. And even if you don't look your age, you're still going to get carded for cigarettes. You can't drink alcohol until you're 21. Like, what is the big deal with making stronger rules for guns? Like,
And I don't know if I said it, during the podcast yet, but we talked about it briefly before we started, where, we agreed we were going to talk about this subject. And I just admit it's like, yeah, I'm definitely aware of the subject, but I've almost gone out of my way not to read some of these articles. And that was for two reasons. One I said earlier was that a lot of the talk around the police stuff seems messy. So I wanted to let that kind of settle before I really looked at it. But I think the larger one was just that, I don't know how to say this without sounding super cynical, but I just thought, what are they really going to say that's really going to be all that interesting about this? You kind of know that they're most likely going to be like, he legally acquired the guns. I said this actually during the last podcast about that other shooting, I think, where I was like, I hate seeing these fucking headlines where they're like, this guy was able to just legally buy a gun. I'm like, yeah, because it is legal to buy them. So why the fuck wouldn't he? Why would he break into a police station and steal a bunch of weapons when he can just go ahead and buy them? So every time I see that, I'm just like, it almost feels like a waste of a headline. It's almost like saying local mom goes to buy milk. Well, yeah, milk is an outlaw. So why, I hate that stupid analogy. There's a better one there, but yeah, that's part of the reason.
But no, it is as simple as
they all sound the same.
Yeah. I don't think that's a bad analogy because it's pretty much as simple as that. I mean, these people are walking in, and doing that. Somebody just did like this video they showed where they got a 13 or 14-year-old kid to walk into different places. He walked into a convenience store to get some cigarettes, and they were like, "Get the fuck out of here." He walked into a liquor store to try to get some liquor, and they were like, "Get the fuck out of here." He tried to buy some lottery tickets from someplace, and they were like, "Yo, you're too young for this. Get out of here." He walks into a gun show. The guy sells him a gun, a rifle. Didn't try to card him anything. It's like, you have these gun shows where these people don't adhere to the rules. You have stores that they adhere to the rules, but again, as long as I think it depends on the state, and I think some states are 16, some states 18. They don't really check. They just want to make sure that you reach the minimum requirements, and they were like, here, if it's certain guns, they'll make you wait a couple of days, but they generally just approve you. They don't. It's not like trying to get a credit card. Like, you have a harder time getting a credit card, or a line of credit, getting a loan, all of that stuff. Things that are life-saving, but life-taking, just take it.
I saw the video you mentioned. I just remember thinking, is this some kind of a parody or something? Like, because I looked at the kid, and obviously everybody else laughed at him. But when the dude sold him the gun, I'm like, he has to be in on this joke. Like, look at him. I know it's fucked up, but I looked at him and I just thought, about the guy who was willing to sell the kid the gun. Apparently, I was like, you don't see the news. This doesn't look like like you're gonna see this kid on the news tomorrow having shot a bunch of people. Again, fucked up thought, but that's the first thing I thought of when I saw him willing to sell this kid the gun. I'm like, you see a lot of kids who look kind of like this in those stories, right? Like,
yeah,
none of this feels a little concerning to you at all. I guess if you're cynical enough, anything's possible.
And it's not even cynical. You just don't care. You care about the money. I mean, guns are a high profit industry, and following the rules don't make you money as much as not following rules.
I'd seen, it was like one of those, news sections. They always have that like background stock footage, and they were showing, I guess, some clips from like a gun fair or whatever where they were selling, and I saw a couple of those rifles, and I was like, I'm not, maybe this is incriminating to say, but I just remember thinking, like, that's a little bit more affordable than I would have thought. Like, I could buy that, pretty well. I guess I shouldn't have thought they were that expensive if, young people can buy them. But I just remember thinking, like, that's not that expensive. Like, I could go there and buy one right now, and I wouldn't really feel that in my pocket too hard. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I just thought about that because you mentioned the profit. I'm like, oh, I guess they're able to profit because they're able to sell them easily and a lot, not because any of them individually are that expensive.
Yeah, and it's funny
It didn't
because
cost as much of a car. That's it. I'll put it that way.
right, and that's the thing. Like, should it? Maybe, maybe not. But think of the responsibility that's afforded towards getting a car in this country. Again, like you can't just buy a car and you're good. They don't let you take that shit off of the lot if you don't have insurance. They won't let you drive around legally, but for so long, unless you get it inspected, you get it registered, you get all the paperwork and stuff done. They make sure that they have it claimed to your name, title, and all of that, all your records straight. Better not have any things suspending your license or anything, or you're not going to be like. There's a lot of responsibility given to owning a car, beyond just the cost. Again, these kids are able to walk into these stores or go online like the guy in the movie theater a few years ago and purchase these things, but no problem.
Honestly, as somebody, into the tech sector, I remember a few years back, and I guess this is still an issue. There was this huge hubbub about what were we calling them? Ghost guns, I guess. Like guns you could 3D print essentially. And just in the tech world, there was this debate about how would we handle that if you can because 3D printing is becoming more and more affordable. You can probably still buy some of the, what do we call them? 3D Make or something. I can't remember the Maker Box. There was a brand that had become more popular. I had a friend who actually went and worked there, colleague. And I remember that debate, oh man, there's people gonna be printing guns and doing this and doing that. And I just thought, today I was for some reason thinking about that. It's why? You could just go buy a pretty good gun right now. There's nothing really stopping you. I guess you could.
It's probably
perhaps
cheaper and less timely expensive. It's experience to actually go to a store and buy a gun, to be quite honest.
If you're only have the 3D printer for a gun, then I'd have to look at what they cost nowadays. But yeah, probably about the same. So and I think about some of these stores, this, I guess, 18-year-old who went in here and did this. I don't know if we know why yet, but it's a lot of the times if you do some shit like this, I have to assume that you're gonna get caught, right? None of these people ever. I don't recall any of these stories where the suspect is a mystery because they got away with it, and I don't even know that they even try to get away most of the time all that hard. So they're pretty much single uses only. So I don't know. It's a very dumb economic weird thing to think about that I got fixated on earlier.
Well, I think part of it is because they know they're going to get the attention and they're going to have the recognition. It's a weird, and this is where I understand when people say there's something mentally wrong with these people. That's not an excuse as to why we shouldn't have stronger gun laws, by the way. If your defense for not having stronger gun laws is, well, we need to worry about the mental thing, fuck that, because you're not worried about the mental thing, about the culture of guns that we have in this country where we, promote guns the way we do. It's not as bad as it was when I was a kid, but yeah, there's still people out there, raising their kids, to love guns and shit like that. So let's, either purposely or just low key, because most people used to like to give us guns when we were a kid, and there's still people out there who do that, who think that kids should run around playing cowboys and Indians and cops and robbers and have toy guns and shit like that. So let's be honest. But no, I think it is a popularity thing because people remember these moments in history. And they feel like their name will be remembered sometimes. Sometimes they're just not even thinking about that. They're just, whatever the situation is, this is where it led to, and they just don't give a fuck at that point. But the thing is, they didn't give a fuck way before the whole incident goes down. So why aren't we like, if you have concerns with people's mental health, why aren't you being more vigilant about who like gets guns and you do better screening? Again,
I was about to interrupt you just when you mentioned the mental health thing. I was like, if anything, the mental health is a better argument for more gun reform. It's like, all right, if you're convinced that there are all these people with whatever mental situations you think they got going on, it's like, well, like imagine if you were living with somebody you knew had like some sort of mental health related violent tendencies, you'd probably be a little more careful about like where you put the kitchen knives. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that whole argument always seems so fucking stupid to me. It's like, well, it's a mental health problem. Like, okay, even if it is.
This is going to be a gross comparison, but they wouldn't hire a pedophile to be a teacher in an elementary school, now, would they? So why would
say
you,
no?
So why would you facilitate someone that you think is crazy with the opportunity to pick up a gun because you don't want to actually go through the process of making it difficult? Because like, even if somebody is quote unquote normal, you still want to make it difficult, because it's the same, again, it's the same thing with driving. There's a responsibility with that vehicle because you can harm someone, you can cause an accident, you can possibly kill someone with this thing, if you are irresponsible and reckless with it. So therefore, I need you to understand what you need to do to operate this safely and do the right thing with it. It's all we're fucking asking. Like, to be, at least most of us, because again, like I said in the beginning, there are extremists who are like, ban guns, ban guns. Like, I can't go to that extreme because I'm too realistic. One, we've gone too far into this whole situation where it's going to be as simple as boom, guns are banned. That's going to end the discussion, I think. Because
you mean realistic in terms of what kind of legislation could pass,
right?
Okay,
yeah, like that. Like, he can do an executive order, but the structure and the way things are and the lay of the land of the situation, there are people in positions of power. It's not just worried about how the people are going to react. There's people in positions of power that are going to manipulate the system to get it changed back. I mean, we just discussed how they've sat for the last 50 plus years waiting for the opportunity to fuck with Roe versus Wade. You really think that these people are just going to disappear off the planet Earth once you ban guns and not try to fucking get it back to the way that they have it now? Come on. Like, that's a long-term strategy. But for the short term, we could make it simpler by fucking making better regulation.
Yeah, I guess thinking through when you started to mention that, the extremists, I was like, I mean, I'm kind of extremist, I guess. I'm at the very least willing to talk about, I want to say assault weapons bans, but you talk about the way that people have that lazy argument, like, oh, guns don't kill people, people kill people. One of those types of arguments also from gun fanatics tends to be like, what is an assault rifle? Blah, blah, blah. They get into this weird, dumb argument about the characterization of certain models of gun. And I'm like, I'm not going to get into this fucking debate with you. That's not even the point.
No, but you can, because going back to what you said about banning assault rifles, they were banned. President Clinton banned them. You could not buy an AR-15 or anything that classified as an assault rifle in this country. But lo and behold, the same thing. They wait and they wait and they wait. And then during the Bush administration, they finally got it to the numbers where they could pull that shit back and get rid of the assault rifle ban. Because you can't ban. There are people who are willing to.
I believe it expired, right? And then they just, I guess, had the political power not to
touch it. Yeah, they just
they
didn't have to do anything. Yeah. So they, like I said, they wait for the situation where they can take shit away and keep it moving. Like it's dumb. It's dumb. So yeah, you're gonna have to like if you want a full ban on guns, this country's culture has to change, and we see like with everything else, with homosexual rights, interracial marriages, hell, us being free as African Americans, we see how long of a struggle it takes to get to at least a better point, not even the like optimum point, but a better point in this country. Like the Buffalo shootings displays it all. There's still people out there who don't like equality and fear that this is some plan for us to take over. So, like, and when did like the fucking 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment get that was, that was back in the 1800s, y'all, the late 1800s. We're in 2022. There's still people out here tripping off that shit.
I mean, yeah, I guess that lends to the point I was making earlier about like why I wasn't reading those articles. I was like, what is really going to be the difference? Like, yeah, I can hear the politicians saying, we need to change this, we need to do that. First of all, to kind of harp on the line about the extreme standpoint again, I remember hearing a bit earlier, I said I am not really following that story. That's half true. I'm following it enough, I guess, in the sense that I just kind of listen to news regularly in general. So I'm kind of listening to it, kind of trying to ignore it. But they were talking about, potential red flag laws. And I just thought, we have no fucking spine. Like we're barely even, we just talked about re-upping reinstilling the assault weapons ban that we already used to have. Like, is anybody really talking that seriously about pulling that one? Or maybe they are, and I'm just ignoring them because like we've already had a bunch of assault weapon related death and we're not doing anything about it. So maybe I'm ignoring them because I don't believe that's feasible. But we're having this debate about the age at which you can buy guns, red flag laws, these sort of more minor regulations. And I just thought, God, we are so goddamn fucking spineless in this country. It's like where we can't even pull off tiny regulations, like these sort of nitpicky loophole closing kind of things. I don't mean to demean them like they're not important. I'm just saying like they're not bold. I'll put it that way. And even those we're just kind of wrapped up in arguments about.
Yeah, it's just it's tiring. And now we have an extra element with this, whole thing as the shit show that is apparently the police's response, which I don't want to get too deep into it, but I do find it like, for one, it is spitting right back into the face of all the people who have the good guy with the gun theory, because aren't the police supposedly the good guys? I mean, again, like I've said before, we were taught cops and robbers back when we were kids. Cops are the good guys, the robbers are the bad guys. Criminals are the bad guys, cops are the good guys. And the cops are pretty much like, supposedly the standard image of a good guy. You look at movies and things like that, the cops are, mainly the good guys in the movie.
I know this isn't the point, but
I know.
I was actually having a discussion with somebody the other day. Is that true? Because I was watching this horror movie where the cops were like, bullying the kids or whatever. And I'm just like, man, so many movies or I don't know if you watch me play Life is Strange 2 a bit, but the cops would fuck you over. And I'm like, God, it feels like in so many movies and games and shit, the cops are just always assholes. I remember asking somebody in chat, I was like, is there any stories you guys remember in recent memory where the cop that showed up was actually a good person who wasn't corrupt?
I mean, now it's sad because you're making me kind of think. Because again,
outside of those those sort of detective shows or whatever that you see where I guess those main characters are cops. I can't think of any where they were just like side characters that like pulled up and were actually like helpful and nice.
Yeah, I mean, and when I say that we were taught they were good, because we had things like, I don't know if they still have stuff like this, but McGruff the crime dog was a big thing back when I was a kid, telling you to be, mindful and be good and the law is good. And they had the officer friendly program. That is actually a real thing where you would get an officer to come to your school and talk to you about like doing good and being good and staying straight and things like that. Like that would there were real things like that that continue to happen. And most of the earlier crime shows, cops were depicted as always being on the right side of the law and do good. But yeah, as the 80s started to evolve and you started to see and hear more stuff about crooked cops more as time goes on, it has developed into like it's hard to see. And even in real life, because I always go back to this story around when I was 14. I'm sitting in my room after school doing my homework, and I hear yelling and screaming outside my window. So I look out my window, and it's like, I want to say 3 cops. This guy, this black guy, and his little child. And the cops are just like asking him, "What the fuck are you doing here? Why are you walking here?" And like, in the apartment complex that I lived in, there were like 3 complexes kind of connected. You could walk through all 3 to get. And then like in the back of mine was in the back. In the back of my complex was a community center and a small playground where people. So the guy's trying to explain to him why he's walking by my building, which again, I'm used to people walking by that building all the time because people go that way to get to the back of the complex and to get to the community center and whatnot. That's, it's a shortcut. And he's trying to explain, and the cops is like yelling at him. And like, all of a sudden I see the cop grab him and was like, "Do you want me to fuck you up?" And I'm like, "Yo, what the fuck?" And he's doing this shit in front of his child who's losing his shit because his daddy's getting jacked up by these cops. And this is like, so whenever I see like fucked up shit with the cops, it's not hard for me to imagine it because I witnessed that shit like as a kid. So it's but again, they're supposed to be the good guys. These are supposed to be the guys that is protect and serve. That's their motto, all of that stuff. And we're getting all these crazy stories about how the local police showed up. They wouldn't let anybody in, they called in for federal backup and they wouldn't let border patrol, and they wouldn't let border patrol. They basically sat out in the parking lot for, I believe it was a good 20 minutes while the killer was in there. There's reports that there were cops that ran in, but they didn't run in to protect the kids. They ran in to get their own children and take them out of the school. There's report that the on-duty officer had left, and once he heard of the incident, didn't come back. There's blame. They're trying to say one of the teachers, the reason the guy got in was because one of the teachers had opened the door and left it open and didn't close it. When you have reports of kids calling the cops, telling them somebody's breaking the glass and coming in. So it's just like all over the place. Like I just sent you something where one border agent, where the border agent said that the gunman who killed the kid was a border patrolman who was like, "Fuck that, I'm tired of waiting," and he ran in and took care of the situation. And you got other reports of cops running by kids while they were going in who were dying because I don't know why and things like that. And it's just a fucking mess. It's like a lot of shit that's coming out of this, and it's making like police look bad. And I didn't want to talk about that and necessarily speculate about that because God knows. I don't know how to speculate on that. It's frustrating to hear that type of shit, and it's annoying. But like to what you were saying to me earlier before we started, you kind of do want to hear more, even though the more I hear, the worse it gets. Especially coming out the mouths of the cops are saying shit like, "Yeah, we didn't go in. Yeah, we wanted to hold back. Yeah, we're certain that we didn't shoot anybody, but not saying it with assurance that they may have caused some of the deaths of some of the kids in the shootout." Um, it's just like for me, the biggest issue is this whole like argument that people keep making about giving a good guy a gun or arming more people is the solution to this. If you have professionals who are supposedly reacting in this way, who are fearful of going in to combat a kid with two AR-15, what are you expecting these teachers to do? Why do you keep saying the armed teachers? That's not what they're paid for. That's not what they're there for. Are you going to train these people properly? And even if you train them properly, what guarantees do you have that they're going to be like in the movies, like the Dirty Harrys and shit like that, and just be the good Samaritans that take out this like heavily armed criminal who had body armor and shit like that because they're good guys. So that's how it works. The good guys always win, right?
I laughed for a second there when you mentioned, are you going to train them or arm them? I just thought, we already pay teachers like shit in the
Right.
first place and like treat them like shit. It's like, I don't know where the expectation that they're supposed to sacrifice themselves for your kids suddenly comes from when you don't even treat them like people. That's, well, I guess we just have a very entitled outlook on what teachers are supposed to do.
Right.
I guess I think about that a lot because, one of my favorite teachers, like we're still friends on Facebook, even though I don't really talk on Facebook to anybody. But I believe she retired. I might have mentioned this before, but like I see her post things about how she just didn't want to be a teacher anymore, and she's not the only one. And a lot of her colleagues said a lot of the same things. It always kind of depresses me when I see her post stuff like that because she was a very important teacher and person, like in my formative years. In my high school, really, really taught you how to like think and look at politics. She was an English teacher, but critical thinking was a big thing with her, and she was really big in imparting that. And you always think those kind of teachers are going to like help a lot of other people, but like just watching her love and interest in teaching die as I grew up, it's very fucking depressing. So when I hear people say shit like, arm the teachers, do this, they should do that, or even I think it was Cruz where I first saw this door argument thing come up, always throwing them under the fucking bus. I'm like, this is why nobody wants to be a fucking teacher aside from how shitty the pay is. You expect them to do everything. You apparently expect them to protect your kids and all this shit, and sitting here trying to throw blame. Like, even if it's true, I guess, I don't know, maybe they have footage of the teacher apparently leaving the back door, but I know this isn't the point, but like, I just wanted to touch on this. Fuck off. Like the bigger problem is that we have such extreme gun violence in this country in the first place. Like, it is not reasonable or fair to look at that teacher who apparently like left the door open for a second, like, you caused all our kids to die. Like, what? We all do shit like that all the time.
It's funny because I saw a response to that too, where someone was like, well, during the summer, this purported grid that Texas has their own is prone to go out, and schools have like made it a habit of opening doors because they can't get the proper air ventilation or coolant at this time of year, even though it's getting close, because it's very hot there. So if she did prop that door open, okay, fine. She was oddly enough doing it to protect the kids from fucking dying of a heat stroke. I'm sure when she propped that door open, nobody in that building had the thought that, oh yeah, a kid's gonna run up to you, with a couple of, AR-15s and mass murder like the people in the building. And
Right,
if he
like
has the two guns, again, there's people saying how they were hearing broken glass. Like he could have shot the windows. He could have shot that fucking lock open if he wanted to get in. Get the fuck out of here. That wasn't the catalyst for all of this. Please.
uh, even if she didn't have like a great reason, like she was doing it for, I don't know, do it to like go out and take a fucking smoke. I don't fucking know. Like, I still don't give a shit. That's so not the fucking point. And I'm not surprised by what people like Cruz say anymore, but I'm like, fuck off already, dude. Like, just go back to your normal guns don't kill people, people kill people shit. Like, don't try to play it's the teacher's fault because they cracked open a door.
But at that point, if I step out of my house and go to the store, go to the gas station, go get something from McDonald's, and somewhere in the middle of me doing my normal daily routine, I get shot in the fucking head, you're not going to tell me shit that came out of the house that day. So this is bullshit.
As far as the police response in general, the reports that maybe some of them didn't want to go in because they didn't want to get shot up. I think the rumor you mentioned about some of them maybe dispatching their own kids, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of that stuff to really go through individually. And to the extent that they handled it poorly, obviously, fuck them. But I've been seeing a lot of that take up the news. And I kind of don't care very much. Because it's like, I mean, I care like I said, to the extent that like if they could have saved more lives, they should have. But I'm more distraught by the bigger problem that so many lives are in danger all the time anyway. Even a competent police force coming in there, even if everything went right, they saved a bunch of people, even all of them, still having a maniac with assault rifles with a bunch of 9-year-olds and shit, that's already a terrible place to be. You've already kind of lost a certain battle when you're in that position in the first place. So having the discussion about like what the heroes should have done or could have done or whatever, that's kind of secondary to the bigger issue.
Well, and here's where I and I wanted to make this point. I thought about it after our conversation earlier. Here's where like I kind of throw a lifeline to the cops, and you kind of helped me with part of my point from what you just said. So we're under the assumption too that these cops are always trained and keyed up for these things. They may have some training, but your regular cop, especially in a town like Ulvade, I'm sure there's not a lot going on there to where there's like, a high level alertness for this type of situation. More importantly, it's not like we necessarily, it's funny because you're training kids how to deal with these situations, but are you training cops like with the proper response? Are we sure that these cops knew what have a proper response plan out for a mass shooting? Because in certain places, like you're not going to expect stuff like this, like, and they may not have the budget for things like that. Like, I wouldn't expect them to have the same response team as we do here in Washington D.C. You know what I mean? There's cops every fucking where in DC. I mean, shit, all the federal cops, like, but like, and secondly, you brought up the fact that this kid had the ARs and like, are they even equipped to deal with that? Yeah, they're probably not on a regular basis. And they don't, I can't see what my I could say I have a 9mm and I'm a good guy and I can take out this bad guy. But this bad guy has 2 fucking assault rifles that is able to pump out like hundreds of rounds within a couple of minutes. And I got this fucking Glock 9mm, what have you, that's like 16, 18 shots. 9 times out of 10, that person's going to win that battle. Unless I'm fucking Dirty Harry or one of these movie characters that is like super wicked with his accuracy and shit like that, and I'm able to pop off headshots like before this guy could even let loose around or something like that. Like I fault them for their response, but we also have to realize that part of the reason why you shouldn't ban assault rifles is because immediate police response is always not going to be the best. Like, yeah, they needed border patrol, they needed SWAT, whatever, because they need somebody with heavy guns to get there. Again, to me, that doesn't absolve them of their duty, as this is what I hate to say it this way, but it's just like, this is what you signed up for, protect and serve. There, that there comes a risk with this, and that is supposedly why you took that job, because you want to make sure you keep people safe, and that it may come a time that you may be called on to risk your life. But there are other elements to this that, and I only make these arguments to make the argument of why you need to get rid of assault rifles. Because, again, inherent risk with being a cop. Should you want to even put them in this position too? To have to make the decisions that they made? Like, you could kind of make things a little bit easier by getting rid of these assault rifles. It may not stop mass shootings because, again, it's so easy to buy a gun that you can get enough pistols or whatever and still probably cause a little bit of that, but you'll cause maybe less damage. And cops maybe will respond a lot better to that. And you save some lives by getting rid of something that can tear through. Like, again, the thing can spit hundreds of rounds in like a matter of a couple of minutes. Why should anybody be able to walk around with something like that? There's no reason. There's no hunting reason. There's no protection reason. You don't need that. Unless you're unless you're fighting off zombie hordes. What the fuck you need that shit for?
I guess I can add police to another group of people we don't really give a shit about. I mean, yeah, you're right. There actually are, obviously, when you think about the amount of violence there is, fair amount of police deaths, I guess, but like even that's not particularly protecting them is not a motivation either. So I don't remember which politician it was, but somebody was I think you sent me this little clip too. Somebody asked the guy, about the assault weapons or whatever. He's like, well, you might need them for feral pigs or some random shit.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of these arguments that it's like
really quick. Where the fuck does he live? That your pigs is that feral? Like, is this a scene from the Winnie the Pooh movie that's coming out?
I've seen I've seen that exact argument before too. So maybe there's just somewhere in the country where that's an extreme problem. I don't know. But again,
your problem is not an AR-15. Then move.
Got to protect your farm or whatever. Again, one of those arguments that's like, who gives a shit? It's the same as like the mental health thing. It's like, well, okay, we can acknowledge, I guess, that there might be a disproportionate mental health problem here, but that's not really that important. In terms of that's not a reason to not have gun regulation. And the same thing here, where I thought, even if that's somehow true, that this like feral pig problem or whatever for some people is that egregious, and somehow that needs to be the weapon of choice to deal with it.
I'm sorry.
So what? I guess, when we're drafting new legislation, make some sort of carve out for that, some sort of special license. You got to live in a certain area, whatever area this is with that fucking problem. You got to have whatever training, I don't know. I always hate that because I've seen that fucking thing argument more than once. I just thought, okay, if that is true and that is legitimate, I kind of struggle to believe that it is. But if it is, I get, I've never lived everywhere in the country. Even if it is, have the carve out, have legislation, do something. That's not a reason.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we live in a
Bob over
society.
here needs to shoot down feral pigs. It's not a reason to let little Billy, 18-year-old psycho, have the same exact gun.
But no, like we live in a country that likes to like, you know, come up with organizational, you know, organizational like solutions to things. Why don't you just have a feral pig squad on your police that come out every like once every day or two and just slaughter the feral pigs for the citizens? And then you can have lots of pork and you can help people with food, and then it's all good, baby.
And
You
you're
have a
creating
cookout.
more jobs, right? Government
Right.
jobs.
There you go. More jobs for people. The feral pig patrol. Let the professionals handle it, you know?
Yeah.
God damn it.
That
Feral pig.
that is another idea. I was leaning toward the, having specialized licenses or whatever, but that's fine too. Like whenever this is the case with many issues, but especially with gun regulation. Every time somebody says some shit like that, I'm like, look, you just want to keep your gun, then you're just sort of half-assing stupid reasons to have it. Like, none of the things you actually say are problems that would be all that hard to deal with. Even if I accept that they're legitimate problems, like, okay, they're not insurmountable by any fucking means. Just address that too.
Right. It's just like the Laura Barber like response the other day that I sent you, where she was like, we didn't ban planes after 9/11. First of all, also you fucking like there's no correlation because we don't have a problem with people having access to planes to fly into buildings on a regular basis like we do with that. So you can't make those two things connect. Second of all, we kind of did ban planes for a little while we came up with solutions to regulate air flight now. Like for all you people who may be too young to realize like why you have, or you may not remember why you take off
the TSA
your, like,
before that.
We not in the capacity that it is, no. But like all the taking off the shoes, the limits on what you can carry on the plane, how much liquid you can carry, all that shit. All of those are regulations that are born from 9/11. So we didn't just like decide to do nothing, or take the planes out of the hands of like, good Samaritans and law-abiding citizens. Like, oh my God, she's a fucking idiot. And I don't know if you saw that clip of her like saying like, people are selling hot hemp at a debate.
That one I saw. I didn't see the plane thing. I saw or accusing that man of being a drug peddler or something because he's moving hot hemp. I didn't know where that came from. I did not understand the context. But.
And neither did the audience, and they all laughed at her. And she's, oh my God, please let her lose.
The sad thing about the plane comparison is how do I put this? If you needed to go that analogy, that route, I guess the easier thing to say would have been like, well, 9/11 hit, we overreacted and then did all this shit that's not really that useful and kind of onerous. Like, it is questionable whether a lot of that shit is even useful. I've actually been through the airports, in recent years. Things like taking off your shoes and that kind of shit, put aside how useful it is, they don't even really enforce that all the time anyway. Like, if it's kind of backed up or whatever, they don't give a shit. They'll just kind of let you go. So that's always been kind of
see, that's not, but again, that's not a regulation problem. That's an execution problem, which is sadly part of issues. Because again, I go back to my good guy with the gun theory. In theory, the cops were supposed to react a certain way, but not necessarily how it goes when you're dealing with human beings and they're actually put in that situation. That's why the whole good guy with the gun thing is like, who knows if the good guy ain't the one who's shooting the kids because he's just firing off like in panic, not really picking his target, just firing blindly. Who knows if the good guy they'll just shoot themselves trying to get their gun. Like, who knows how you're going to like react? Like, just because you're a good guy, you have a gun, don't mean that you're going to be the solution to a problem. Because everybody can talk shit about how they act until like it's kind of the Mike Tyson theory, but applied to guns. You know, he's always said everybody, you know, thinks they can fight until they get hit. Until they get hit, it's like once you get hit, all of your plans change. You know, once you get punched in the face, it's a lot different than like talking about it. You know, so
But the reason I bring up the plane thing and the argument she could have made is whether they want to enforce that shit or not. There is at least some argument about how effective some of that stuff is versus how much of it is just sort of theater as a reaction to the attacks we had. That's not really the same case with the gun stuff, right? Like we have evidence that shit works.
Yeah.
Case in point, we had the assault weapons ban already, and we had that data. So it's
and
not like
shootings went
still not
down
the same
something
thing.
like 43%. I think they said once you did that. So you have like factual statistical evidence of that shit.
Right. So like even if I gave her the more logical argument for the plane analogy, it still kind of doesn't fucking work in this case anyway. So it's like, but
yeah, because again, you still got to try something before you can find out if it works or not, right?
Sure.
Like you at least want to try something, like instead of just like, well, let's not do anything because it's not going to help.
Or especially when you see other countries doing it to theirs and you're seeing the difference in their statistics too. It's like, at this point, it's barely an experiment. You can almost guarantee it will work.
Yeah.
And if for some reason it doesn't, then fine, we can change. But like, the argument is dumb. It's dumb because there was a better way to make the argument. But again, even if she made it the better way, it still would have been dumb. I mean, I guess that's why it's called conservative, right? You just want to conserve the way things are, no matter how shitty it is. It's incredible. And I've seen a lot of that comparison in the news too lately, you know, talking about like, well, New Zealand did this and Australia did this, and what's wrong with us? What's wrong with us indeed?
Very much so. Very, very much so. What is wrong with that? And I think that's the
I don't care to
way
make those comparisons every time, but yeah.
No, but it's like, what's these countries decided? Like, I guess the best answer is like, clearly they're a better breed of people than Americans, because once those decisions were decided, the people were like, yeah, we shouldn't do this shit. Here, the people decide, well, what about my freedoms? You know, how dare you tell me to do something? It's like, there's no concern for like the whole here. It's all about what I want.
I made the comparison before during Brexit. I can't remember. I never remember who the fuck said it, but they made the point where they were comparing us to, you know, the UK. That part of the problem with what allowed Brexit to happen is, in terms of legislation, those other countries can just move far faster than us, even if it's to do something dumb for them. In the case of Brexit, he was arguing that part of their problem, which caused that to happen, was they were able to just kind of do shit pretty quick. So they were able to just kind of sprint face first into that fucking Brexit wall and experience all those problems. And then he got to us and he's like, the difference between us and them is like, well, with us, we can barely pass anything at all. So like, our laws are kind of like codified, or not codified, fossilized. It's really hard to change shit here. Whereas other countries, like, yeah, it's a little more feasible to actually do a thing. But I heard another explanation when somebody else was thinking about this problem today, specifically about the gun issue. And they were pointing out, you know, I guess rightfully, that in those countries, they don't have the same problem with the power dynamic that we have here, where a minority is able to just sort of veto and stop any real progress from happening. Like the way our system is set up, like, you know, the every state has the same amount of senators, for example, right? So it's like there is this outsized power that like an extreme minority has in this country that's not really balanced the exact same way in other countries. Because he was pointing out, like, yeah, some of those other countries had a culture of, you know, gun love before and whatnot, but and they have their own gun extremists and whatever, but like they don't really have the same level of power to do that kind of shit and to really stop progress. So it didn't really matter. I don't know those countries' histories that well, so I can't really speak to how true that is, but I kind of understood his general point, at least, which is you see this in the Senate a lot where McConnell's group is just able to filibuster anything they want. So even if they don't hold the majority opinion, it kind of doesn't fucking matter because you don't have to be the majority in this country to do things like that. They have the power of fuck you. So like,
yeah. I really like that because it's a lot more effective, even when it comes to some crazy things. So at least you're able to move past the crazy shit if you like get the right people. At least they can do something to correct it. Like there's no course correction here. It's just all long, drawn out fucking bullshit.
which, you know, I guess to add, I'll just, you know, repeat the question about how I was feeling. And I said tired. I'm like, I'm tired of some of the same headlines. I'm tired of everybody always pointing out, like, you know, the majority of the country agrees with, you know, things like abortion and gun rights and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay. So, like, you can say that, but here we are pulling back abortion rights and here we are not doing shit about guns, right? Because, you know, again, to the point I just made before, given the power dynamic in our country, the majority is not really required to do certain things.
Not at all.
Majority consent, I meant to say, is not really required to pull off a lot of things. So it's like, I'm tired of hearing that like it's some kind of giant positive. It kind of not.
Yeah.
All right, maybe that was too cynical a note to end it on. But
No, I mean, it is. I mean, what positive note do you end on here on this? Because as I said, you know, in the beginning, we just got over 2 other mass shootings, like within a week or less of this. And it's just like, we're just cycling back. So like, till like there's something like demonstratively done, we're just gonna cycle back again. And so I'll see you guys in another couple of weeks when we do another one of these episodes. It's summertime now. Like, you know, they're out. People are going to be at all of these venues and shit like that. The clubs, the beaches, the malls, the swimming pools.
maybe this is an even more depressing note to stop on. But how do you feel about going to those kind of places?
Honestly, the pandemic is like reaffirmed my whole feeling of like not dealing with the public. Like, I will go to dinner with friends, you know, and family, but you know, age had already like soured me on the large venue things and less intimate you know settings. But between the pandemic and realizing how people are acting coming out of the pandemic with their cooties and now they want to all be up on you, like I got used to the 6 feet. I like the 6 feet. I don't know you. Back up off me, please. um, and just like the fact that, you know, the beginning of the year was signaled as the beginning of the end of like pandemic living and getting back to normal, and 212 less than 200 days. Yeah, I'm fine not getting back to normal like that. Get the fuck out of here.
I asked because I think it was last night. I was reading a social media post from a friend. She has a couple of young kids, and she was remarking on this shooting and like talking to her older son. God, was that kid got to be around 8 around now, 7, 8? And talking to him about it, and I've seen a lot of these stories from other parents, but it kind of struck me with her where she kind of talked to him, and he was saying that he was kind of afraid to go. They live in Florida, by the way. It's not close to Texas or whatever, but I guess that even makes the point more vivid. He was saying he kind of doesn't want to go to school because he's afraid too, and I just kind of read that, and I was just like, that's why I asked you the question, because I was like, I don't know, the fear there. I remember having a similar feeling when there was like some store shooting, not in the same state I was in Florida at the time. And sometimes I think about like going to a store and I'm like, is there going to be like some fucking lunatic here doing God knows what? I've gotten pretty used to like ordering groceries since the pandemic shit. I also have to get some shit done with my car, so I haven't really been driving to the store. But I was thinking about that. I gotta get my car fixed. Gotta get back on that, because ordering all the time is kind of shitty. And I just kind of had that thought in my head earlier. But I was like, all right, I gotta get this shit fixed. But it's like, even when it's fixed, do I want to go? Maybe I should keep ordering.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just about the convenience thing. It's like you don't want to deal with human beings, like, because of the way things are. Like, I mean, to your point of ordering food, shit, Buffalo, people just were going to the grocery store to get some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Which obviously I feel weird, because part of me was like, all right, well, I can't say like I'm not willing to go and then put somebody else in that same fucking danger, because I'd feel fucking terrible about that too. But yeah, I was thinking about the kid and his fear of just going to school, and like, yeah, how do you? I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. That was essentially why I asked how you were feeling about being in public spaces. Do you feel that sort of fear in the air?
I felt it even with what I've been doing for a living. It's just a constant thing with me, especially the more you hear in the news, because it's just like, yeah, like if I could find a remote job, I would take it, and I would hold on to it for dear fucking life. I just don't want to be around people in large masses anymore, because you don't know, like, between COVID, between the mass shootings, and just in general, like introverted behavior and things like that. Like, yeah, nah, I don't. But yeah, those two reasons mainly. Just don't want to deal with it. Yeah. Let me pick and choose.
I hate reading those. I think you sent me one too. Like some other dad was talking to his kid, crying about the whole situation, and the kid was like, "Don't worry, we trained for this." And I actually started to like tear up when I read that part too.
I cried. I'm not gonna lie. When I read it, I cried, because I was just like, "Yo," I'm like him, and I don't even have fucking kids. I'm like, "Yo." At worst, what we had to worry about were fire drills. Or I remember slightly, like when before we moved up north and I was still in Georgia, there would be tornado drills, because there would sometimes be tornadoes or hurricanes down there. That was the extent of our like fucking worry. Now you got to be trained to lock doors, and even if you hear screaming, don't open the door. Like, how the fuck you tell a kid some shit like that?
Yeah. And I just keep hearing the podcast. I listen to a kid that's like a young kid. He's not in school yet. And he said something like, my son isn't old enough to be going to school yet, but like I read these stories and like, now I don't want to send him. And I just think the deaths are horrible. The argument about gun legislation is stupid and horrible. But I just think about the fear in the atmosphere, and I'm like, how do we live with that? And just like people are literally afraid to go to stores and send their kids to school, and people still think that nothing needs to be done about that. Like, when people are waking up afraid to do mundane things, I don't know, like, how much worse does it get outside of just, I don't know, civil warfare or whatever in the country? Like, you can only sink so far.
Yeah. It's rough. It's rough. All right. Let's get the hell out of here. Thank you guys for listening, watching. We appreciate all the views, all the listens. You know, one of these days we'll be at a point in society where when we do these things, it won't be as stressful or as sad, you know. And again, make sure to check on everybody. You know, just simply saying, "How are you?" You know, that's all it really takes. So, and you know, just be safe out there, please. Like, hey. All right, any closing words, sir?
Obi-Wan came out, so you can watch the first 2 episodes of that.
Yeah, at least you have some things to kind of distract you from the noise, like bad.
Wow, this light fucking blinds me over here. Get this shit out of my face. Sorry.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Reason Reborn. Peace.